Behind you, Steve. I have no idea.
Under pressure.
Thought this was tire pressure.
That you shouldn't walk under. That's for sure.
I'm live on Facebook. Matt, let me know when you got me.
But you're not live on Instagram.
And Steve, I got you.
I don't have you on Instagram, Chase.
Wait, it's because there's a delay, Steve. We're going through the sky into outer space.
Oh, snap.
I got you. Socks themselves.
I got it, Chase. So, today we're going to be talking about traction and tire pressure and bottoming out. But the way we have to discuss it, we'll come back to this later. We got some cool stuff going on.
You know a lot about bottoming out, Steve.
I do. I may not bottom out, but I'll always beat the sides up, just so why my rims are all dented. So we have to go over to none other than Justin.
Hi.
To talk about tire pressure.
Justin over here. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. The reason we're running a little bit late is because we didn't test any of this concoction that we have outside. We've got practice straps and tie downs and all kinds of stuff up there. And then Matt went over there and made a spear out of duct tape and a knife. You guys will see that here shortly.
Ernie's out of the office. We decided to use his car as an
That's true.
Hopefully he's watching.
Yeah, that's Ernie's car up in the air over there, and it's because he's gone today. So we're taking some liberties with with his car.
Till he logs
It seems
in.
like we've been gone for a while. It's been like at least a week since last Tuesday, huh? Sorry, I had to take Thursday off. We were doing some testing, and it didn't get done in time for us to get back and do what we're supposed to do. It is Tech Tuesday. It is Tire Pressure Tech Tuesday.
Tire Pressure Tuesday.
Yes, and tire pressure is kind of a big subject around here because a lot of people think we don't know what we're talking about when we tell them to run it up or down. We are going to prove to you how important it is to have high pressure, low pressure, wherever it might be for what you're driving by dropping that car outside or Ernie's car straight in the shop. And we'll do that a couple times so you can see one way or the other. But if you have questions regarding tire pressure, then put them in the feed and we'll try to get to them. If you have questions regarding style of tire or manufacturer of tire, do not ask us. This is not a tire comparison video. Yes, Steve?
Justin, before we start, I just want to give a shout out. Jake Tarona's mom is on the live feed and she said, happy birthday to my son.
Oh,
we'll
happy birthday,
Happy birthday,
Jake.
Jacob.
We're going to get you some more Jake here in a little bit. He got some blueberry muffins this morning.
He did. He asked for blueberry muffins, so I delivered.
So we're actually doing a lunch celebration of Jake's birthday and also Brandon's birthday this week, I think on Thursday.
Yes,
and
sir.
we might have actually one more person to throw in on that. Next week, we've got a birthday on Monday, and we'll wrap them into it too. We have so many people around here, it's like one birthday every week. So we kind of combine everybody into one taco Thursday.
We've had a whole month here of every week with free lunch here.
Yep. Matt likes it, right, Matt? Speaking of tire pressure.
Speaking of Dunlop. All right, so let's get into the details, nitty-gritty of tire pressure. So everybody's got their preferred pressure that they like to run. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm going to tell you why you should do a couple things, and you guys can modify it according to your needs and your use. If you look at the board, the wonderful board of misspelled names and words, that's because I can't spell. Tire pressure today, but you guys know it's true.
Yeah.
And it's because I don't care. Besides that, tire pressure. We've got kind of two different mentalities when it comes to tire pressure. You've got in the sand and you've got off-road. And in the sand, typically, we're dealing with a sand tire and what it requires and what its best tire pressures are. In off-road, every off-road tire, let's just, in a round number, we're talking about what they all would typically want and what they would experience. If you're a trail rider, then we're going to call that off-road, and we'll deal with that as we get to it. First, there's pretty much low pressure, low tire pressure, and high tire pressure. And when you start running tire pressures low, which in the sand is going to be 6 to 8 psi, or anything under 10 psi, off-road is going to be down at the 12, 13 pound range, or even lower than that. As soon as you start getting into those areas, there's a couple things that are going to happen. You're going to get a really plush ride. That thing's not going to, you're not going to feel the rocks and the chop and chatter. So if you're going to be trail riding really slow, like under 25 miles an hour, crawling a lot of stuff, through a lot of rocks all day long, kind of Jeep trail stuff, and you really want the wife to be super comfortable, then you can drop some tire pressures. The negatives, when you go lower and get a plush ride, is that you can easily pinch the tire. What do I mean by pinching the tire? Well, come on over here to the cartoons. As you start to roll into a rock with a normal tire and low air pressure, then that obstacle, rock, tree, branch, whatever it might be, is going to push the tire up into the wheel a lot farther and a lot easier as the tire pressures are lower. A pinch flat is usually shaped like a half moon or an hourglass, because as the tire rolls up into the wheel edge, if it's a beadlock or a normal wheel, then that wheel actually will slice the tire and it will look like a reverse portion of the wheel on the top part of the pinch, like this one, matches the wheel, and the bottom will look like in reverse. Kind of concave, convex versions of themselves. That pinch flat is a sign to you that your tire pressures are too low for the speeds that you're running. So as you start driving slower, you can lower the tire pressure. As you start driving faster, you have to run them up. Otherwise, you're just going to blow that tire right into the wheel. If you don't blow the tire up or pinch it, then you will blow the wheel up. The next thing that happens, if this doesn't go flat, then it just concaves the wheel, and you blow the inside typically up, because the inside of most wheels are a little bit weaker than the outside if you got a beadlock on the outside. Some people ask us, do I run beadlocks or do I not? In the sand, we don't. We run a lot of tire pressure and don't need a beadlock. If you run low tire pressure, you're going to need a beadlock. I don't really see any need for an inner and outer beadlock in the sand. Certainly not in UTVs. I'll get into that though, because we do not agree with low tire pressures on UTVs in the sand. We'll get there. Pinch tire. You also have wheel damage. You have ground clearance problems, and it's an uncontrolled spring. Ground clearance. What happens when you run low tire pressure is when you come into a big hit or a jump landing, you're basically going to squish that sidewall all the way down to the wheel. It's going to do this, smashing the tire up into the wheel. And when you do that, you can lose as much as 6 or 7 inches of tire sidewall height that you normally would have had at the most important time when you land this thing and you're about to throw the frame of the car right into the ground and compress your spine. So low tire pressures are really bad when it comes to bottoming out. You're going to bottom out the car when you jump it, when you're in G-outs in the dunes with low tire pressures. There's a couple reasons for that. One, the sidewall that you lose when it's compressed equals the amount of ground clearance that you had now is gone. So if you lose 4 inches of sidewall, you lost 4 inches of ground clearance, and you just throw the frame right into the ground, and that's what you feel. The other reason why it's a problem is because if the tire is what's giving up, then the shock is not doing its job and not moving, compressing, and controlling the system. So typically, shocks are position sensitive and also shaft speed sensitive. So the harder you hit them, the stiffer they get. Well, if the tire soaks up half of that hit, the shaft speeds are lower and the shaft or the shock itself is softer. The harder you hit something, say with more tire pressure, and it actually doesn't compress the tire, but it moves the whole wheel and tire package, then it moves the shock shaft faster, and the shock gets stiffer very quickly. Steve, you got something good?
No, I was just waiting for it. Somebody said, what does Justin think is the best tire pressure for the Speed UTV? I was waiting for it. Someone
well,
did it.
Since that thing is at this point imaginary, except for one, I can't tell you a damn thing about it. Again, the same answer every single video.
We should just start off with that.
We should actually. I should be writing no, I'm not going to say it. Matt.
Thomas Vetter wants to know, how does tire size affect the tire pressure to run? Example, 35 versus 30.
The only difference between the two in tire height is going to be that you have more ground clearance with a 35, so you can get away with less tire pressure and not bottom the car out. Other than that, there isn't any difference between tire pressure reactions on those. More sidewall tends to ride a little bit better. So a taller tire doesn't also fall into a small hole. It runs over the top of a small hole, so ride quality is better. Tire pressure though, I would run the same on every tire that I've got on a UTV, but technically you could run a little less on a 35 than a 30. Matt.
Jacob Williams wants to know, should you air your tires back up when you go to strap the car down on a trailer?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, but how little air pressure are you talking about running? Because if you're going to run 6 pounds in the tires, then yeah, I'd probably air them up to 10 or 15 before you go home on the trailer. But there's almost no time that you're ever going to run 6 PSI in a tire. I'm going to get to that in the sand stuff here pretty quick. So for me, we just never be in that position, whether it's sand or in the dirt. Did you have something, Steve, or no?
No.
All right, nothing for Steve. Ground clearance goes away at full compression when you have low tire pressure. Also, the tire is a spring. So just like a coil spring on a shock, compress it, it's going to shoot back out. You need shock valving and dampening to control the compression and extension of that spring. A tire is the same thing. Take a look at this sand tire, and Chase, I want you to show the bottom as if it was smashing into the ground. This is a low pressure tire as you hit a bump. It's compressing most of the sidewall, and you're not using the shock when this tire is doing that. You're also not keeping ground clearance when you bottom the car completely out. This movement in the tire up and down is uncontrolled. It's the same as an unvalved or unshocked coil spring on your vehicle. So uncontrolled spring rates start adding up to problems when you go through the whoops. If you've got low tire pressure, it could be compressing the sidewall. The next whoop, it might compress the shock. The next one is the sidewall, and it starts to get out of control and act like it's got rebound problems. So air pressure is a big deal when it comes to controlling the tire and the spring rate of that tire. Steve?
Justin, will 8-ply versus 10-ply tire pressure, will that matter between the two? Will it be the same or different?
I would run the same tire pressure whether it's a 6, 8, 10, 12-ply tire. But again, technically, the more plies you have in the sidewall, the less tire pressure you can run and not damage the tire or the wheel. But we're talking about small amounts here, like 1 PSI per 2 plies. It's not very much. Something that we don't change or tune according to tire sidewalls, that's for sure. But I mean, technically, if we're, like I keep saying the word technically because there's going to be some engineer on here telling me I'm wrong. You're right, if you get out the calculator, there's a difference between those and you can run less tire pressure, but it's a very small amount. Matt? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. It was just your phone.
That's my phone.
He's blind, he can't.
He's still trying to focus. All right, so low tire pressures. Recap, it's going to be a lot more plush. It's good for low speeds. If you start driving faster, then you need to run the pressure up. You can pinch tires real easy with low pressures. You can damage the wheel. You lose ground clearance, which means it bottoms out easier. It's also an uncontrolled spring, which means overall it's not going to ride as good. You want to break in there, Steve?
Well, no, someone commented on Matt's and said, is that Chase mouth breathing? No, it's Matt. It's Matt.
I was looking down like this. I was like,
little wheezing going on over there.
so now
All right,
I'm
let's
like,
go over to higher tire pressure. As you run the pressures up in the tire in general, the ride is going to get rougher. It's going to get rougher in all the small things you're driving over. Rocks, chop, chatter, shale ledges and trails, roots, things like that. You're going to feel a lot more because the tire isn't soaking it up. But every other thing about how this thing works is going to ride or be better. And that means you're not going to pinch tires as much. You're not going to damage the wheel as much. You're going to gain more ground clearance when it's fully bottomed out. And this uncontrolled spring of a tire, when you have more pressure in it, is less of an item to think about because the tire doesn't compress as much. So everything about it is better except for the plush ride quality. Steve?
Justin, are there any advantages from nitrogen to compressed air?
The only difference is that nitrogen isn't going to raise up in tire pressure as the temperature of the tire and the temperature of the gas inside the tire goes up. Compressed air, you can put 20 pounds in the tire and then go run 50 miles and it might go up 3 psi. If you have nitrogen in there, it might only go up a half a psi. So controlling total pressure and keeping it consistent is the only advantage with nitrogen.
If the sand is wet or dry, does that change the tire pressure?
Wet sand has more compaction. It is harder, so you'll typically squish the sidewall farther as opposed to pushing the tire into the sand when it's wet. That means that it won't bottom out as much. It also means if you start running the tire pressure up a little bit, pretty much never bottom it out. So soft sand bottoms out easier. Soft sand doesn't have as much traction. A lot of guys are going to run the tire pressure lower, which is a double-ended sword. Lower tire pressure bottoms out easier. Soft sand, you bury the tire into the sand easier. Both bottom out. It's bad all the way around. Anything else before I go into sand tires, why we recommend pressure?
No, sir.
Okay, strictly, if we're talking about the sand, and we go out there and we work a lot and do a lot of vehicles in the sand. So we have people come in stock, get our stuff, come back, they love it, but a couple come back and they're like, hey, my car bottoms out here and here. Well, what we usually do is look at the car first, take a look at the tire, and we can see a wrinkle in it. Obviously, they're running really low tire pressure, and it changes everything about what we did for shock work. So we like to see people run more than 10 PSI across the board, definitely more than 10 PSI. We prefer 12 to 16 PSI in a sand tire if you want the suspension to work right and you don't want it to bottom out. This changes according to the tire selection. So if you're running a buffed tire like a Scat or anyone else that has got a tire that's been shaved and a paddle glued to it, the sidewall strength and the tread strength, because it's been buffed, is considerably less, which means that it flexes more than a typical sand tire. And you're gonna have to run more pressure in that tire to keep it to support the system and have the suspension work properly, get the shock to function in the bump stage and not bottom out. If you run like a STU or a Sand Tires Unlimited tire, you can run less and it's still gonna support the system, run 12 PSI and it'll act like a Scat with 16. So you have to run a lot more than you typically would think. In days past, 20 years and older, everybody ran 3 to 7 pounds in the tire. The reason that everybody did that is for flotation. As you run, the tire pressures lower, the tire squishes out sideways, the center of the tire is not pushing its way through the sand, it's kind of accepting the sand, and a heavy vehicle would kind of float up on top of the sand and have more traction. Okay, that is not an issue in UTVs. Number one, they're lightweight. They're under 2,500 pounds. Most of them are going to be 1,600 to 2,200 pounds in the sand. They're not heavy enough to shove themselves through the sand. Second, they're four-wheel drive. When people were dealing with low pressures and the mentality of running low pressures for traction and flotation was when you're talking about sand rails, buggies, Volkswagens, even V8 rails, two-wheel drive. They might need the flotation. With four-wheel drive, you do not. I've taken bone stock knobbies underneath that pallet right behind you, Chase. Me pointing, that means, typically means point over there. I've taken
People were just
stock
complimenting
knobbies.
him too.
Yeah, done.
Yeah, I just threw that out the window. Good job, Chase.
Bone stock knobbies, 30-inch tires on an X3, and run 16 PSI in those and gone everywhere in the dunes I ever wanted to go, no problem. Stop everywhere but directly uphill. I mean, stop on almost everything and keep going. So there's no flotation problems in UTVs. Also, when you run the pressure down, you have all the negatives I discussed. When you run the pressure up and you don't care about flotation one way or the other because you have four-wheel drive, then you can get the suspension to work better and the car drives better. You can drive faster through G-outs. You can jump bigger without bottoming it out. Also, you'd be very surprised, a lot of sand tires pick up traction as you start getting above 8 PSI and into 12 PSI. And then they start losing some traction at 16, somewhere in that range. But there's a happy medium on how a paddle will grab sand because pressure is pushing and backing up the paddle. And if the pressure is too low and it grabs sand, it'll fold the paddle back into the tire and you have less traction. You start adding pressure, that paddle has structure and it'll actually grab more sand until you go too high a pressure and then you're just rounding off the tire and having it not move as much sand. There's a whole science to that. We'll get into sand tires at another time, but you want more pressure than you think. Matt.
Johnny Baker wants to know, how much is the tire contact patch affected by airing up or down?
Well, quite a bit if you're talking about 20 PSI swings. At 12 PSI, I would bet you the contact shrinks up about an inch when you get to 25. It's not a huge amount. Go ahead.
I got two questions. One, do you discourage sealants like slime?
I'm not a fan of stuff like slime that's corrosive to an aluminum wheel because you take the thing apart and the wheel's all chewed up. But if you can get something that's not corrosive to aluminum, then I think it's fine, especially if you're in the dirt.
Second question, someone that doesn't have the money to buy paddles, would they run low or high PSI in stock tires in the sand?
You have to run a little bit lower than you would in a paddle because you don't have a paddle to give you the traction that you need. So stock tires are probably going to be 10 PSI. My minimums on a paddle are going to be closer to 12 and 16, somewhere in that range. Matt.
Do you inflate tires the same front and rear always?
We typically do. You don't have to, and that's an experiment that's probably best for you to try. It's super easy. Go Put 12 pounds in the tires, and then air the fronts down to 6 and see if you like it or not. It's going to walk a lot because now you don't have the strength in the sidewall, and you turn the wheel, and it's going to take a while to react. But you might like it that way. So just play with that kind of thing. You'll find that out. We don't change it on our personal car. We run the same front to back. Anything else?
Ali Ailes in the chat room. So is BDI. We also have Mike Dubs wanting to know how many tacos would it take to feed the entire crew.
Well, just
well.
first shoot over here real quick.
And it takes a few right
That's
here.
at least 10. There's at least 8 here, at least 8 there. So, I mean, that's a lot of tacos. At least 69, right? At least 69.
Way more than 69.
I
169.
think last time we did a Taco Thursday for birthdays, it was probably about $600 worth of something.
Hey, did Mike Dubs ever bring the taco and beer?
I was gonna say
He's been messaging me about it.
Perfect.
I think that's why he's asking.
I think
how
that's
many
why
it
he's
takes.
asking how many it takes. 'Cause
So
that's
he can bring them.
a lot of tacos.
Yeah, it is. So
the
just-
Brad 09 to end things off here. Sometimes the occasional bottom out is worth the soothing out the chop. To kind of segue.
Yeah,
into our
this is
next
why I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just giving you suggestions on how it works. You guys go out and you figure out what works for you. If you like 12 PSI in a dirt tire because you trail ride mostly, and every once in a while it smacks the bottom of the car, great, good. I want it as flush as I could get it too. But if you're bottoming out 10 times in a trip and you have low PSI, you need to raise PSI. Or do some shock work and fix it through the inside of the shock. What you got?
Mike Dubs said, F word, now I'm bankrupt. But he said he's been wondering what kind of beer we drink so we can bring a couple cases. But what, Chickalobe and Coors Light?
I think Ultra and a little bit of light. There's not very many Coors Light guys in here. Like 3.
More
There's-
Chickalobe.
There's more. Best cameraman ever drinks Coors Light. Chase.
Racing beer.
Most of us are Ultra fans, though. Back to tires. So let me wrap this up. In the sand, you're going to need to run between 10 and 16 pounds. I prefer 12 to 16 pounds, depending on the tire style, just so that the car has the ground clearance when it's completely bottomed out, and big G outs and big jump landings. Off-road, if you have a play car, 12 to 16 is fine because it's going to be plush, but you shouldn't be driving very fast like that. You don't want to be doing 30 to 50 mile an hour with 12 to 16 PSI and start hitting some rocks in the desert. You're definitely going to get pinch flats. If you're racing, BFG recommends 18 to 22 pounds in a BFG, but I can tell you from personal experience that most of the racers are somewhere between 18 and 28 pounds. The guys that run 28 pounds typically don't get flats. I mean, we got 1 flat last year. We never blew up a wheel. Made plenty of mistakes, hit plenty of stuff that should have given us flats. I know a lot of guys that hit a lot smaller things than us and got plenty of flats and blew up wheels because they're running a lot less tire pressure. So something to consider. We put up with the roughness that the tire pressure gives to save the wheel and tire and not stop in a race. So that's what we do. Or we modify the inside of the shock to give us a little bit more plush factor, even because we know we're running 28 PSI. So you guys decide what you want to do. We have, although, back to the beginning of our video, Steve standing underneath Ernie's car, we have a visual representation of what tire pressure is going to do for you when it comes to ground clearance on a sand tire. Hi, Mitch.
Hi.
Hi, Josh.
I don't know
Everybody's part of the video.
Better
now.
cameraman.
who that weird camera guy is.
Right. Okay, so take a look at behind me. What we've got, Ernie's X3 Max.
Oh.
And we put some sand tires on it. And we did a really cheesy, quick measuring device. Now, what's this little shaft here? Well, what we're trying to show you is we're gonna drop this car. This is 6 feet. Actually, I'll get a tape measure and I'll show you guys at 6 feet because we're gonna duplicate this a couple of times. We're gonna drop the car on the ground. We've got the shock set as soft as they can possibly go so that we can get the system to compress as much as possible. We can't bottom the car out 6 feet in the air. It'll take 12 feet in the air to bottom the car out. So what we're gonna do is drop it and we're gonna show you how much ground clearance was left on this rod, which is gonna be a kind of a measuring device for you. And it'll show you what you're dealing with low tire pressure. Right now, these tires are set at 6 PSI. Do you have that gauge? You want to grab that? Or where'd that go? Steve?
there.
Is it right there? Let's show, or grab that one. We'll show everybody what you got.
7.
Oh, we raised it up, 7 PSI. So it went 7 since we set it, all right?
6.9.
6.9 psi, according
Oh
to
boy.
So when we drop this, it's going to compress the system, but what it's going to do is it's going to compress this sidewall quite a bit, and we don't have slow-mo on a live feed to show you what it does. So we're just going to show you with the amount of clearance that's left on that measuring device that we whipped up in 5 minutes before this feed. That's why we were late to get to you. Sorry about that.
Chase, people want to know if you can get under the car for a better angle.
Like over here? Where at?
Get out of there! God damn it. This is what we have to put up with him. If you tell him to jump off a bridge, you probably
I know.
He would definitely do it.
What bridge?
All right. Okay, so we're going to drop it with our handy dandy quick release device right here, Chase, that
Lord
we
of the
found
Flies.
on the internet and got Amazon to deliver same day. Right? All right, so once you set, where do you want to sit, Chase?
I'm going to
Underneath
sit
it?
right here, dead ass, in the middle.
Dead
Why
ass.
don't you take a knee? Why don't you take a knee?
Oh,
Because
hold on,
when this
I'm-
bottoms out,
He's good at taking
One knee,
knees.
2 knees.
don't make me sticky with this quick
All right,
release.
2 knees.
All right. Let's do something stupid. I like doing stupid stuff. Ready? Here we go.
Oh, that was hot.
So, here is, you see where the stop is? That's how much ground clearance was sitting in this when we dropped it from 6 feet with low air pressure in the tire. Where's that tape measure? Let me grab that.
Says OSHA joined the live and they do not approve.
Get out of here, OSHA.
All right, Steve, can
Yep.
you shove 12 pounds in the tires for
Yep.
me? And Mitch, can you do me a favor
Let me hold
and
your phone.
retie that tie up there? So I'm gonna bump this up against this bump stop, you guys. So you can see that that's 3 inches of room. That's basically from here to the ground, but that's actually above that skid plate. Let's take a look at this.
Mitch, you got that digital
This
gauge?
bracket is 2 inches above the skid plate. We have 3 inches showing. That means that there was 1 inch of ground clearance in this system. Let's reset it while the guys are changing air pressure. Back to 0.
Oh, I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Oh, you got it? It's going to take the guys a little bit to kind of reset this, okay? But Mitch is going to tie another strap on there that we can cut. And Steve's going to put 12 PSI in the tires, and we're going to drop it again and show you the difference. What do you got, Matt?
Off-road wiring says, I doubt Amazon delivered that same day.
It does have a signature on it, signed by Matt. Somehow he made it, I think.
And then Mike Dub says, that is some Bill Nye the Science Guy shit right there.
There it is. We
in
did the
peace.
best we could in 30 minutes. What you got?
Butter thing.
Oh, yeah, here you go. Right. Hey, Steve, have a seat.
Oh! That's Chase's seat.
There you go.
What side's the blade?
All right. Move this out of the way. Hey, you know what we shouldn't do, Chase? Concentrate on them tying knots and ratchet and
Oh,
strap.
but come on, it's so cool.
Yeah, what
Just
a,
so you guys
what
know,
a camera guy.
What we did beforehand. What we did beforehand is we used to have a quick release latch. I couldn't find it, and we couldn't get one in a day. Otherwise, we pull a cord and let this thing fall. So we grabbed a bunch of toe straps that were broken and had been frayed and all kinds of stuff, and we're just knotting them together and cutting them up. Matt, what do you got?
Mike Dub says, Chase, Bill Nye isn't dead.
Oh, oops.
Who did you think Bill Nye
I thought
was?
he was dead.
Who did you think he was?
From the science show.
Why would you think he's dead, Chase?
Internet.
Yeah,
hell of a
believe
drug.
everything they say. That's right.
Hell of a drug.
What else you got, Matt? I'm trying to kill time here, bro. Help me out.
Richard Noah wants to know, does Scat buff paddle tires lose paddles with less than 14 PSI?
Does Scat tires what? Do
Lose paddles.
Do they lose paddles? What do you mean by lose paddles?
Oh, maybe they break off?
Lose PSI?
No, he says,
So, it's like, does a knob fall off? Can you lose a knob?
can you lose the paddles?
Oh, well, the paddles rip off eventually, if that's what you mean.
Maybe thinking it's too much. Maybe.
Well, so here's the thing with a Scat style tire is they don't last as long as like a molded tire like a Santars Unlimited tire does. Typically, a Scat paddle will start to lose the front edge of it, even if it's a like a nylon or not Teflon. I forget Kevlar. Kevlar construction, you'll lose those. And sometimes they'll rip off eventually, but usually that's when you hit stuff. If you floor it when you're going across the street, you're going to rip them off, that's for sure. What do you got, Matt?
Corey Backstrom says 6.9 is just a good time interrupted by a period.
As well as I got a live one here. Smooth D was asking how can he get a t-shirt. Smooth D, you're live on the air.
Steve, go for it.
What's your question? Where are you at and what are you driving?
I'm from Arizona. We just picked up a 2021 Can-Am 4R. My question is, on the dirt setup, we got Methods and 32-inch KM3s. Do we have to get those balanced, or we just throw them on like that?
Strictly off-road?
Yeah, that's the dirt setup.
I wouldn't get it. I mean, if you're going to be driving it on the street, yeah, possibly, but if you're just being strictly off-road, I would not.
Right on. Cool.
All right, brother. We got a t-shirt for you. Make sure you send us a direct message on Instagram here. We'll send that out to you.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in, brother. All righty.
What else you got, Steve? You got something to talk about?
I got Robert's Coats here wanting to go live too.
I think Steve just wants to dance.
Steve, you know, he usually dances in his free time.
There might be a good little dance video from me later, but I don't know. We'll see.
With that being said, Steve, we got Roberts on the live. Roberts,
Oh, man.
what's going on?
Back to back.
Where are you at? What are you driving and what's your question, brother?
I'm in Alberta, Canada.
Hey.
Canada. And if you look closely, we actually still have snow on the front lawn, about a foot.
Good goodness.
Question for you, what would be the best shock to start with for jumping shocks?
Jumping shocks, best start.
Jumping shocks. It's going to be the best jumping shock, Justin.
The stiffest shock made is the best jumping shock.
Okay.
But you know, stiff shocks tend to ride like crap everywhere else. So, you know, you want. I would say the highest quality built shock made, which is Fox, King, Walker, in that order. Fox, in my opinion, and the most adjustable one, because then you can turn it all the way soft if you want it plush. You can stiffen it all the way up for jumping. So the more adjustability, the better, in my opinion.
So in jumping, would you rely like on a higher spring rate and soften the valving a little bit, or would you rely more on valving and less spring rate?
So both are opposite. If you're jumping strictly, you're going to have more spring rate and you're going to have more valving. If you are not jumping, you're going to have a lighter spring rate and less valving. If you run less spring, it's going to require more valving. If you run more spring, it requires less valving. But if you're jumping only, you want a lot of spring and a lot of valving.
Gotcha.
Now, if you're jumping only, that's easy. Set it up to jump and you're good to go. But if you're jumping and having fun, you're not going to want to drive a jump setup in your fun time. Certainly not.
Well, and I have a jumping car now, and it is brutal. If I go through whoops in that car fast, it is very violent.
That would be what I would expect. Absolutely. So jumping only, extremely stiff. That's for sure, and that's the way it has to be if you're going to go big.
Gotcha.
Cool, man. T-shirt size and color. We'll send it to you.
Large.
Put it. Message us to
Direct
us.
message.
Don't worry,
Message,
Chase won't
and-
send it to you.
Yeah. Message Chase. He'll send it to you.
I got a guy.
Wicked.
Have a good one.
All right, guys. We're back. And did you change air pressure as well, Mitch?
Yeah.
Steve did, yeah.
Steve did? What do you got in it? 12?
12.
Okay, so we went from 7 psi to 12 psi. We brought it back up to 6 feet. Exactly 6 foot. And you can see that. I didn't measure it at first, but you guys could tell it's the same spot. And we reset our little ground clearance meter, okay? So let's drop it right now and let's see what the difference is in ground clearance when the tire pressure went up. Remember, two things are going to happen here. One, the tire is not going to squish on the sidewall near as much, which means you're going to end up with more ground clearance. Two, since the sidewall didn't squish, that means that it pushed the shock shaft faster, and that means the shock will get stiffer just strictly by having more air pressure in the system. So let's see what it does.
Drop it like it's hot, Justin.
Drop it like it's hot, Steve.
Bust it.
All right, where's the sharp end of this dull knife? Hang on. I need longer T-Rex arms. Hold on. Here we go. Tape measure. Up a little bit. There we go. 5 inches. We gained 2 inches of ground clearance strictly by putting a couple PSI in that tire and allowing the shock to stiffen up with shaft speed. 2 inches of ground clearance is huge. The reason is an X3 only has 1 inch of ground clearance factory. So if you lost 3 inches of tire, that means that you're going around the dunes driving the chassis of the car into the sand 2 or 3 inches under the sand every time you bottom it out. If you run the tire pressures up, shock works better, bump stage is higher, shaft speeds are higher, and you don't lose ground clearance in the sidewall of the tire. So when we tell you to do this in the dunes, and you guys look at us like we're crazy and we're trying to make excuses, understand there is some real science to this. It's actually important, and you need to follow tire pressure rules in the sand.
Facts.
There's a lot of
Facts.
guys looking for 2 extra inches. Stall your tire pressure
Well, it
right
was
there,
free.
fellas.
Tire pressure was free for an extra 2 inches there, Chase.
I'm gonna go.
That means
I'm
you
gonna
need
go
to
get
get
my
an air-
tires when I get
You
home.
need an air compressor and need a Schrader valve in your butt.
Oh my goodness, I'm getting one. Done and done.
All right, if you guys don't have any more questions, then let's get out of here.
Steve,
I
you
got
got
nothing.
anything?
I got nothing,
I think
man.
that was a mic drop. Let's get out of here.
I got one more live.
no more live
pitch.
Chase.
We
You
got-
do not know what timing is all about.
Hey, this is. I can't help it. People
No,
want what they
stop
want.
it. No, stop it. Get out of here. We're done.
Brian, what's going on? Where are you at? What are you driving? And what's your question? You are our last questionnaire of the day.
And it is Chase's last day as well. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Nice. 2016 Turbo Razor. I just picked it up actually. Question on what to do for springs or valving. We're going to the dunes here pretty soon.
Springs or valve?
Springs or valve. I mean, definitely start off with a spring kit. The two work together great as a pair, but if you're looking for a change in the ride, do a spring kit before you do the valving.
Yeah. Okay. And then it's probably easier to send them into you guys to do it all at once, correct?
Yes, and if you do want to do that, make sure you call into the shop at 623-217-4959, and make sure you schedule an appointment because we are booked out. I don't know when we're booked out to, but we're booked out.
Okay. Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you.
Right on, man. Send us or send Chase your t-shirt size and color, and he probably won't send it to you, but just do it anyways.
Thank you.
You got it.
I appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, if you're looking to buy anything off of the website, please go to www.shocktherapist.com, or if you have any questions, call in at 623-217-4959. Get him, Justin.